Growing up as a child, we used to have toys that always challenged the ideology of, is it safe? Back when toys were toys and not this cheap plastic crap that fell apart when the height limit exceeded the knee of a child, we had real toys. Metal, rugged, small choking pieces. Hell, some probably had flammable hair and clothing if you were the one playing with dolls. We had revolvers that you'd put blasting caps and point them at your friends and boom! Hearing that crack of the cap was exhilarating when it went off, as we pretty much completely went against the grain of proper gun safety. It was okay, because you had an orange cap at the tip of the gun, and back then kids were a little bit smarter. We knew how to play make-believe. We played cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians. We played in the mud. We had our fair share of dolls, whether it be Barbies for the girls or G.I. Joes for the boys. Back when portable phones were the dreams of a madman and televisions required getting up to change the channel, whether it be turning the knob or sliding that bar or hold 12 channels. But then it turned to letters, and then you had to start guessing which channel was which. Well, the late 80s and early 90s still linger in my memory. Many have forgotten some of the best toys that flew under the radar when it comes to safety. It was ovens made for children. Ovens that had recalls due to severe injuries and lawsuits. On this episode, we're talking about Easy Bake Oven and its male counterpart, Creepy Crawler's Molding Oven Kit. Before we get started, I want to say a huge thank you for checking out this episode. If you love what we're putting out, hit that like, hit that subscribe button. Right now is a small channel. The only way we're going to grow is word of mouth. So share with your family and friends. It's free. You got a birthday coming up, share it. It's free. Maybe they'll like it. I don't know. But pretty much what's been happening is with the chaos and the hectic work schedules and everything like that, we've also been bouncing between achieving failure, joyful calamity, and honestly, it's just achieving failure works better. It's just for the future of this channel and what my vision was originally. It was I wanted to bring some nostalgic stuff. I wanted to talk about some historical stuff, and I wanted to integrate that with life stories and just kind of slam that all into one big, good event of an episode. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about all that in another episode. You're here to be entertained, and as your host, it is my due diligence to entertain. So without further ado, let's get on with the episode. Made back in 1964, Thingmaker, or Creepy Crawlers, was a series made by Mattel which consisted of several variations of metal cast molds thrown into an open-faced oven. Many of the molds had themes such as fighting men, Creeple people. Yes, Creeple people. Sunflowers, mini dragons, and Dolly Maker. Well, they had a good run lasting from 1964 to 1978. They were discontinued due to the using of heat and posed a threat by the Food and Drug Administration. 1978, Mattel re-released an updated and safer version, but it was the 1992 where Toymax revived this to what we remember it being today. That orange and green square oven. Back in the good old days, nothing was more fun than getting your parents to break out that Creepy Crawler set, dumping all the gels on the ground, spilling half the crap on the carpet, but it was okay. I mean, we were kids. We didn't know any better. If you lived in a house similar to mine, It was sacrilege to throw out the original box. So you'd be over there trying to cram your fingers down the sides, trying to grip while shaking, trying to hold that box, trying to flip it upside down, hoping that gravity would take over and pull the box down. You'd gather up the oven, the metal trays, the tray holders, and with all these accessories, you were able to make a variety of different bugs ranging from moths, worms, scorpions to beetles. With the help of this plastic goop, a wonderful mixture of PVC and plasticizer, and heating that bastard to a staggering 390 degrees Fahrenheit, holy hell! With that multicolored plastic goop, you were able to make a variety of cast-molded, solid, rubbery insects that were advertised as to scare your family. For me, half of them just came out messy, unrecognizable, and sometimes they didn't cure fully, so I'd wind up just burning my hands on the metal trays. Again, kids' toys that should have never been made, but to think, this is the third rendition. The first one was even wilder, but we'll talk about that in another episode of Banned Children's Toys. So with these new monstrous creations of goo really didn't have the proper characteristics of falling into the scare realm, it was still a lot of fun. It was also, it started getting the wheels turning in the mindset of creating and reimagining. While you were limited to bug creations, it opened the doors to new possibilities. While not to say the boys were having all the fun, the girls also had their own version called Dolly Maker. While this was the same concept, playing with possibly mislabeled toxic goo, pouring it into a metal mold of dolls and clothing, huffing the fumes as you patiently waited around the completed product just to burn your hands immediately. I don't really remember this being as popular during my childhood, but it did come out around 1969, which kind of focused around more of the 60s eras of clothing. The mid-90s, however, was all the rage of baking and creating. I will say the biggest competitor to the creepy crawler was none other than the Easy Bake Oven. Everyone remembers the Easy Bake. You were able to make almost anything in that thing, ranging from cookies, cakes, brownies to pizza. At least that's what was being advertised. The 90s were all the rage of anxiously awaiting for either you or your sister to create something new, and while it wasn't some French pastry straight from the cafe, it managed to tingle that sweet tooth of just pure sugar. Introduced in 1963 and discontinued in 2007, the original Easy Bake was used with an ordinary incandescent light bulb as the heat source, but once again, these temperatures, we're talking 350 to 375 degrees. A friggin' plain Jane household incandescent light bulb. That's all we needed to make our brownies. Well, the original was discontinued for being excessively dangerous. New efficient standards made light bulbs not hot enough to cook the food, while it was also subject to many lawsuits. One being in 2007, when a girl got her hand trapped inside the oven for over 3 hours. Being taken to the emergency room, the doctors were forced to cut her hand off with a bone saw. Wait. The doctors were forced to cut the device off with a bone saw. Oh, heavens, silly me to mix the two up. Oh, how the 90s was such a grandiose time for us who lived it. It was the tail end of something amazing as we wrapped up all the good things from the 70s and 80s, but it was also the beginning of something much different as the 2000 ushered in a new dimension of technology and social media that, well, as for me entering my 40s, challenged and changed society for a far less new normal. As we reminisce about the silly things we had back in our childhood, we compare the then and the now and realize just how lazy we become. Being almost dependent on someone or something to tend to our needs. From a time when we were once hovering over a light bulb, waiting in haste to consume mediocre cupcakes, to now staring into the abyss that is now our cell phones as you watch as your Uber Eats driver circle the block several times, unable to find your location. Well, sure, new renditions of our childhood are still in existence. What's been robbed was the stepping stones of the joys of cooking. We watched adults make cookies, cakes, pies as we were little, standing patiently as every child would back in their single-digit years, waiting for them to finish so you were able to lick that spatula of raw cookie dough. We weren't freaking out about salmonella. To us, it was like a mini reward for being the best child who never once caused any trouble. As we grew older, we consumed a healthy amount of television, which advertising was adversely pumped into our innocent eyeballs. Buy this, buy that. Creepy crawlers, easy bake oven, Dr. Dreadful Food Lab, cookie dough, anything and everything. Everything had its appeal, and as Christmas came through, if we were good enough, Santa brought us something other than just coal this year. As the years passed, the toys started collecting dust, but new opportunities started arising as we had more responsibility and more independency. These came in the form of home economics at school. Unfortunately, even for me, I was one of the last classes that got to experience this, as the school system later gutted the curriculum for some nonsensical mumbo-jumbo. Whatever the reason was, and probably the usual budget cuts, it created generations of uneducated individuals that no longer know the basics of sewing or cooking. Sure, we now have forms of social media that help us from the most basic essentials to the most advanced self-medication. But it was also the experience of being in the 6th grade and being told, today we're going to play with needles and fire. It was being that first day of walking into home ec class and seeing not only the large tables of sewing machines, but the vast array of stovetops that next year, I'm going to earn my responsibility of using. Alas, my youth was not spent in vain, as many tireless afternoons creating, molding, forming have finally prepared me for this pivotal moment in my life. One of the first things we learned in the class was the basics of sewing, threading the needle, approximate length needed, and if you ran out, how to kind of integrate a new thread at the end of the stitch. You know, you kind of have to crawl before you can run, as they say. You have to hand sew before you machine. We learned the loops, the underovers, the cross stitch. But what I learned, if you just pierce the epidermis and just that layer right under there, you could actually stitch your whole hand together. We first learned stitching on pre-cut designs, and from there we laid everything out as the blueprints. For me, I chose a red boxing glove with black lacing cord. We stitched everything from start to finish, and once done, turned everything inside out, the true test to see if you were actually paying attention. By flipping the glove inside out, the stitch was now inward, leaving the outside perimeter a nice flush seam. The exposed bottom was stuffed with filling in all the nooks and crannies. It was such a great self-esteem booster to say, look, I made this. I mean, we're literally talking we're 11 or 12 years old. Learning how to stitch your own clothing, and while we grew older in life, sure, there was always the teasing of everybody saying, you can sew? Dude, that is so gay. Well, guess what? When you were in the military and you had to last-minute sew patches on your uniform while sitting in your car, as everybody else is having a crisis trying to find a dry cleaner or tailor to tend to their needs, it doesn't seem so gay now, does it? Oh, this self-satisfaction also came when you could charge your friends for not only tailoring service, but an inconvenience fee for ball busting that they were just giving you. As the year in class came to an end and we had a summer intermission, finally came the day. After a year of learning how to sew and months of envious staring at the ovens and microwaves that only the privileged 7th graders were allowed to wield their spatula powers upon, my day had finally come. Day 1. We're going to make hot cocoa using mix, water, and a microwave. Oh, you. I waited my entire life for this moment, and we're making hot cocoa in a microwave? I was enthralled with rage, but I had to settle those inner demons, because this was only day one, and we had a whole school year. As the days turned into weeks, weeks into months, we cooked almost everything from stovetop to oven. From grilled cheese to calzones, from brownies, cookies, cakes, proteins, veggies, breads, and desserts. I mean, you could even count one of the guys left some plastic Tupperware on a hot electric stove coil and it just made an absolute mess. We fulfilled the obligations. That was the nutritional triangle. From the base to the peak which held that cupcake. I felt fulfilled, as during the new summer breaks, I would spend the afternoons in the kitchen making peanut butter brownies from scratch. During my teenage years, I advanced and started to learn how to grill the proper way. Well, I'd like to say my skills as a kitchen magician have improved and escalated. There will always be that infamous night that yours truly failed not only as a cook, but failed in such spectacular fashion. It was a late night. My cousins and I were driving home from the Palisades Center, which is this gigantic mall. And when I say gigantic, 4 floors, over 200 stores, 15 restaurants, an ice skating rink, comedy club, and a friggin' Ferris wheel. This was the end-all to be-all and only 18 miles from New York City. Less than 40 minutes from my house. This mall was the place to be. Being listed in the top 10 visited malls in America, this whopper laid out at 875,000 square feet, but only 4 miles from the New Jersey border. Now, why is that? Now, a quick history lesson of New Jersey Sunday laws. They purposely positioned this Palisade Mall on the border because they wanted to avoid New Jersey blue laws. Now, this blue law is one of these weird laws that restrict the selling of unnecessary goods on Sundays. These items included clothing, furniture, and appliances. It was actually pretty wild because you would walk in like a Walmart and they would have these gigantic folding yellow gates segregating the food from the rest of the clothing. I mean, probably just another quirk of being from New Jersey, I guess you could say. Well, a lot of the state has rid these silly laws. My good old neighboring town of Bergen County still holds on to be true as one of the last remaining and not going down without a fight. So, after retreating home from the Palisades one faithful night from an evening of partaking in celebratory drink and games at the ye old Dave & Buster's, my cousin and I decided to end the night by popping a pizza in the oven at 2 a.m. Being the amateur chef that I am, but tapping into my knowledgeable skills of my easy bake oven era, learning the basics of cooking, and putting all of those skills on hiatus while joining in the military. I mean, honestly, what's the worst that can happen? I mean, it's only pizza. Well, lo and behold, time makes fools of us all. As I became easily distracted and the readiness of the pizza had far come and gone, while missing the ding of the microwave timer, my next alert was that of smoke pouring out of the oven. The smoke alarm going off, everyone in a panic trying to swipe the smoke away from the alarm. The further I opened the door, the more smoke came bellowing out. It was just total pandemonium. I grabbed the only oven mitt that I could find. I reach inside and I grab the pizza in haste. And while mid-pull, my mother comes running down the hallway. She's utterly confused, the face of fear and panic as she thinks the house is on fire, but the situation abruptly changes to the realization it's just a bunch of drunk, rowdy 20-year-olds. She screams, "Christopher, what the hell is going on?" For me, being taken off guard by her entrance and not the bedlam that lay before me, I quickly grabbed the pizza with the other bare hand as to stable the shaky pan and I throw my hands in the air. Pan goes flying this way. of emit towards the heavens, and everything concluded with a horrendous crash and rattling. Now, I may not be a medical professional, but I will say the next morning I had severely deep purple burns on both my hands and up my arms. Things didn't help that the fact that I had to work at an automotive shop, and I actually had to work early that morning, it did not help the situation. Everything at this facility revolved around carrying tires, reaching, pulling, and working with hot liquids. As I worked my shift, with my arms wrapped up in bandages, I resembled that of a dollar store mummy. I took my scheduled break and exited the building, to which we had a smoke pit around the corner. Pulled up a chair, pulled out a Newport, and struggled and fumbled with the lighter. As the grit of the lighter's spark wheel hit the flint, I tried desperately not to be a part of the combustible equation. With my success of not becoming the next Human Torch, I sat back, took a deep drag off the cigarette, and while exhaling, I started to laugh subtly to myself as I remembered that day that I opened that box on Christmas, pulled out that magical oven called Creepy Crawlers, plugged it in, poured that toxic goo into a metal mold, popped it in the oven and patiently waited, and when the time was right, as anxious as I was, I grabbed that metal mold with high hopes of seeing the creations I made, but burned my hands throwing both the mold and semi-liquid all over the floor as I just did the pizza. Oh, history repeats itself, and we are damned to relive it. Thank you for checking out this week's episode. If you love what we're putting out, hit that like and subscribe button. For those listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, hit that follow and give me a rating. The only way we're growing is by word of mouth, to share with friends and family. Thank you again, and we will see you for another episode as we achieve failure.
Sorry. Sorry.